Sunday at 9:30, when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 8 o'clock from the world headquarters of GB News. This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Is International Women's Day still necessary? Could Joe Biden survive another 4 years in the White House? Is it wrong to slap your children on the wrist? As Rupert Murdoch gets engaged at 92, does marriage in later life work? And should the pro-Palestinian protester who did this, take a look at this video, slashing a historic painting at Cambridge University with a knife, should they go to jail? This is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Bring your own drinks. The admission is free. On tonight's show, my Friday friends, Britain's best-known political double act, Neil and Christine Hamilton. Plus, TV legend Sue Cook live in the studio, journalist and royal expert Pandora Forsyth, and fearless US commentator Mel Kay. Would a Donald Trump victory be an early Christmas present for the UK? My Friday Big Opinion is on the way. Britain is broke, and politicians are not being honest with you about why. So some truth bombs coming after the news headlines and a good friend of mine, Sam Francis.
Mark, thank you very much. Good evening from the GB newsroom, just after 8 o'clock, and we start with news from Northern Ireland, where families of alleged informers who were killed by the IRA say another step towards truth has been made after a report into the activities of a double agent was published today. The investigation revealed that more lives were probably lost than saved by the spy, codenamed Steak Knife. He was working covertly for the British Army inside the IRA's internal security unit, known for abductions, torture and murder. Northern Ireland's First Minister has apologised today to the bereaved families and said she's wholeheartedly committed to healing wounds of the past. Steak Knife is widely believed to have been a West Belfast man who was 77 when he died last year. Solicitor Kevin Winters, who represents a number of the victims' families, says the agent needs to be officially identified.
The decision not to name Fred Scappatisha as the agent Steak Knife has been difficult for many to accept. The legal and technical rationale for doing so will be lost on many people, particularly next of kin of those murdered.
In other news, George Galloway says that he has hundreds of candidates ready to run in the next general election. The leader of the Workers' Party of Britain was sworn into Parliament on Monday following his by-election win last week. Speaking to Neil Oliver, the MP said his success in Rochdale was the straw that broke the camel's back.
The spread of candidates, challengers, new parties, independent candidates and so on is now proceeding like wildfire. If I tell you that I have now in my pocket more than 300 prospective parliamentary candidates, all paying their own election expenses, by the way, because we can't pay them. More than 300 Workers' Party parliamentary candidates. Imagine that.
Well, you can see that full interview with George Galloway on YouTube and online on gbnews.com. That's from tonight at 9 o'clock. And then again on Sunday with Neil Oliver at 6 p.m. if you miss it. In other news, Downing Street says the Prime Minister does take concerns about the impact of pro-Palestine protests extremely seriously. That's following claims that London has become a no-go zone for Jews. It comes after Rishi Sunak said that forces are trying to tear the country apart. Writing in The Telegraph, the government's counter-extremism czar said it was right that Rishi Sunak raised concerns about the increase in extremist disruption. And he also said ministers need to be willing to accept higher legal risk when they tackle extremism. Well, you may have heard earlier this afternoon that a historic piece of artwork was damaged by a group of pro-Palestinian activists at Cambridge University. If you're watching on television, you can see here footage showing that painting of the former Prime Minister Lord Balfour being sprayed with red paint before it was slashed by an activist. The government advisor on political violence and disruption has described those actions as outrageous and, he said, senseless. But the Palestine Action Group claims the piece symbolised the bloodshed of the Palestinian people since the Balfour Declaration in 1917. Police have confirmed tonight that the broadcaster India Willoughby's accusation of misgendering the author J.K. Rowling does not meet the criminal threshold. Willoughby, who is transgender, had reported Rowling to the police for an alleged hate crime after calling her a man on social media. The Harry Potter author, though, rejected those allegations, saying that it's not a crime to hold gender-critical views. And finally, some quite astonishing news that we've heard in the last hour or so, that police in North Yorkshire have arrested an 11-year-old boy who was caught driving a BMW on the M1 and towing a suspected stolen caravan. Officers said they were staggered when they found the boy driving down the motorway. He now faces charges including theft, burglary and dangerous driving, but thankfully no injuries were reported. Those are the headlines for now. I'll be back at 9 o'clock. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code there on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Sam. So, is International Women's Day still necessary? Could Joe Biden survive another 4 years in the White House? Is it wrong to slap your child on the wrist? And as Rupert Murdoch gets engaged at 92, does marriage in later life work? And what about this developing story? Absolutely shocking. It broke this afternoon. Should the pro-Palestinian protester who did this, slashing a historic painting at Cambridge University with a knife, go to jail? All of that plus much more on Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Sue Cook live in the studio, Pandora Forsyth and the Hamiltons. This is not a drill. First, my Friday Big Opinion. Good evening. Now, the Chancellor's budget statement ran to over 7,000 words, but can be summed up in two. We're broke. As the cost of the public sector goes up, the quality of our public services goes down. We're running a deficit, which means that more income goes out than comes in for day-to-day spending. The national debt is well north of £2 trillion. 10 million Brits of working age are not active in the economy. 10 million? Are they all ill and depressed? And the cost of interest on our debt alone is £100 billion a year, which is almost double the defence budget. So how did we get here? Well, notwithstanding years of anemic growth, with low GDP and low productivity being a British disease that goes back not just years but decades, there is the small matter of our 2.5-year failed attempt to stop a seasonal respiratory virus called COVID-19. Now, yes, it was a nasty bug which took too many from us, but one non-fatal to the vast majority of the population. Remember the ad campaign, Act Like You've Got It? A disease so bad you had to pretend you had it a disease for which a third of the population had no symptoms at all. And for that, we closed schools. We mothballed our health service. We created a mental health tsunami. We borrowed £500 billion. We paid perfectly healthy people to stay at home and bake banana bread, watch Netflix and start a wine collection. We closed down thousands of once viable businesses. It was mad. If we'd taken the approach of Sweden, who didn't bother with lockdowns or mask mandates or vaccine tyranny, we wouldn't have the debt, we would have a thriving economy, and there wouldn't be 8 million people waiting for NHS treatment or a generation of damaged kids. With post-pandemic excess deaths through the roof, lockdowns have got to be the most failed so-called public health policy in history. When excess deaths were high during the pandemic, we had to destroy the country to tackle it. Now that they're still high, no one gives a toss or even wants to ask why. Well, it's not just COVID. There's another big thing. Britain lives beyond its means. You've been lied to by successive governments about just how much the state can do for you, whether it's the provision of welfare, the scope of the NHS and the wider public sector footprint. Now, I believe in all of these things, including welfare, but the cost and scale of the state is out of touch with the balance sheet, and it's out of touch with reality. In the last 2 decades, we've only evaded this truth with money printing and the accumulation of debt. This is dishonest and gravely immoral. Why? Because the buck will eventually stop with future generations. British kids who haven't even been born yet, who will pick up the bill and inherit a country which is no longer financially solvent. We're already nearly there. All because politicians couldn't be honest with you about how much governments can do and how much needs to be personal responsibility. For example, we should all look after our health better, rather than burdening the NHS to the extent that we do. But when it's free, who cares, right? But that is simply not sustainable. The state has been wiping our backside expensively for years now, and the result is that Britain is on the skids. Now, to be fair to Sunak and Hunt, they have steadied the ship. But the problem is, that ship is the Titanic. And at the moment, it's at a very awkward angle in the sea, and the deck chairs have long since washed away. The politicians won't tell you, so I will. As well as the historic and disastrous COVID overreaction, the real elephant in the room is that Britain lives beyond its means. That is some big elephant. Tusk, tusk. For reaction to the big stories of the day, my Friday friends tonight don't get better than Neil Hamilton, former leader of UKIP, current leader, but on his way out, I should say, and the brilliant Christine Hamilton, author and broadcaster. Great to have both of you with me. First of all, Christine, do you think, and would you agree, that generations of politicians have not been honest with the British public about how much the state can do?
Well, how do you know when a politician is lying? His lips are moving.
Right. Does that include Neil, by the way?
Of course not.
Even when he says, I love you?
He's about to... No, of course they have. And they were still doing it even after the budget. I couldn't believe it. Out on social media, they were talking about a tax-cutting budget. No, it's not. They haven't cut taxes at all. By not changing the thresholds, they're still raking in 4 times as much. I mean, they do lie, and the public aren't taken in anymore. People know, it's the economy stupid, and people know from their pay packets. We're pensioners, and we're part of the millions who know all too well that the budget has been really bad for pensioners. Now, we're OK, obviously, because we're in the lucky bracket, but millions of pensioners are going to be seriously worse off.
What about that triple lock, though? That was good for pensioners.
It was, but we're not going to be able to afford the triple lock, and the triple lock will get whittled away anyway if they don't change the thresholds. The triple lock will become meaningless.
Of course. Now, Neil, setting aside the pandemic, because I do think that's one major elephant in the room, we borrowed £500 billion to pay healthy people to stay at home. The government and the health authorities are very clear that measures like mask mandates, vaccine mandates and the lockdowns saved countless lives. They're very clear about that. That is mainstream scientific view. It's not mine, but it's important to point that out. But what about that other side of it? Generations of politicians, even when you were in the House of Commons, not honest with the public about what the state can actually afford.
Well, I think we were in my time, because when Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister of this country, came into office after the winter of discontent in 1979, where we were not even able to bury the dead and rubbish piled up on the streets or all over the country. It was a crisis which couldn't be avoided. And the Thatcher government made a decisive change in this profligate attitude, which has now come back again, because today's Tory party has failed to learn the lessons of the 1980s, which, at considerable cost, we managed to turn the country round again. But then, of course, the benefits of all that have now been thrown away. And today's government is nothing like what a Conservative government should be. As Christine said, we've had lies pouring out of them over the effect of the budget. They lie about the National Health Service, which is clearly unsustainable in its current incarnation. We cannot afford the level of healthcare that a country as wealthy as ours should be able to get with a Soviet-style model of a health service, which nobody else in the world has copied. So it's the envy of the world, but nobody, absolutely nobody, has copied it. And yes, it is a time for telling truth, but don't expect it of the moral cowards that we've got in this government. You know, they never faced up to the real costs of COVID. I'm pleased to say that I was a member of the Welsh Parliament at the time that the COVID pandemic hit us, and I voted against all these control measures because I asked the right questions, which is what's the cost as well as the so-called benefits of doing this, and what are other countries doing? And as you say, in Sweden, they had a completely different approach. They have got nothing like the problems that we've got today. But we haven't got politicians with the moral courage to face up to these problems.
Of course, now the government would argue that without those lockdowns, the country would be in a far worse shape and we'd have seen many more casualties from the pandemic. Of course, it's all a debating point. Also, the government will defend major tax cuts, unprecedented reductions in national insurance. But listen, let's get to another story if we can, Neil and Christine, because this one broke this afternoon. Pro-Palestinian protesters have destroyed a painting of Lord Balfour at Trinity College, Cambridge. Take a look at the video, and if you're listening on the radio, let me describe it. This is protest action group Palestine Action, filming a video of a demonstrator slashing a portrait of Lord Balfour and spraying it with red paint. Now, the Conservative politician Balfour gave his name to the Balfour Declaration, a public statement issued by the British government on the creation of a Jewish homeland in Palestine, paving the way for the founding of Israel in 1948. Is this, Neil, what serious public discourse now looks like?
Well, I suppose, sadly, it is, by and large, for dim-witted idiots like whoever that was who was slashing the painting. Curiously, I think Arthur Balfour might have been rather more relaxed about it, because he famously said that in this life, nothing matters very much and hardly anything matters at all.
That's good.
He was a philosopher as well as a politician. But Balfour was a great statesman in his day, was Prime Minister and then became Foreign Secretary. Later, the only person who's ever done that since is David Cameron. But I don't think the comparison is quite exact.
Let's leave it there.
But no, I think it's outrageous, actually, and we should expect that our legal system would be used to stop this. When I was up at Cambridge in the mid-1970s, we had riots at the Garden House Hotel. They were suppressed by condign sentences that were passed. Students were sentenced to 6 months or a year in prison for the damage that they caused, and that's what should happen in this case too.
Well, indeed. I mean, your reaction to this, Christine, because this person is probably a middle-class kid.
And for those listening on the radio, she didn't just slash that painting once. I mean, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, almost 5 big slashes. It's been completely... It will never be the same again. It can be repaired, but it'll never be the same. Of course, she's educated. Why did they choose Balfour? Because she knew the implications of Balfour to the current situation. It wasn't just a random painting. She should be in prison. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And if she will end up before some judge, and if we get some wishy-washy judge... You remember the judges when they pulled the Colston statue down and threw it into the Bristol, river? Yeah. That was clear criminal damage. There's nothing else 100%. For it. And they were all let off. So
that was a jury that
was the jury, was it?
They were found not guilty.
The jury, you're quite right.
Not good to have a lawyer in the house.
Oh, it's very useful
Neil's
to have a lawyer.
got our back.
Yeah, it's very useful to have a lawyer and an economist.
Because it's been a good week for GB News, but we don't want a court case.
No, we don't want a court case. So, of course, they should be in prison. It is criminal damage, and there's no two ways about it. And I don't know where that painting is. It's Trinity College, Cambridge, but exactly where. They obviously chose when there was nobody around. Very easy.
But are these folks not the suffragettes of their generation? No. And what they're trying to do is stop children and women being killed in Gaza. Isn't that how you get attention? We're talking about them now. Is this not freedom of speech?
Well, we're only talking about them because they're common criminals. I will not...
But what about the right to protest? I mean, this is what the suffragettes did. Is that comparable?
The right... Of course it's not comparable.
But does that mean that if you take the opposite view, you have a right to knock down with a club the person who is causing the damage? This works two ways, you know. And if you get a reaction to... a political reaction to what is happening, then all you get on the streets is violence and chaos. OK. No society can survive on that.
The Hamiltons...
But they constantly try and justify their actions, these people, by mentioning the suffragettes, the women do, and I think that is outrageous. Well,
we're talking about women in just a moment, International Women's Day, but I love this from one of my favourite women. It's Claire Fox, who was on Twitter earlier, on X, and she said, "No longer just performative Philistines, real-life, self-indulgent, nihilistic destroyers of art and history. What an insult. Narcissists hiding behind the Palestinian cause to indulge in their own regressive, visceral culture war to declare they are virtuous activists. Look at me, look at me. Meanwhile, not one person in Gaza will be helped or saved by this act of wanton cultural vandalism." Amen to that. Criminal vandalism. Fascinating stuff. Well, look, lots more to come. The Hamiltons with me right through until 9 o'clock. But next up, is International Women's Day still necessary? We'll debate that with Christine Hamilton, royal journalist Pandora Forsyth, and TV legend live in the studio, Sue Cook. That's next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Our woke army, a topic we talk about almost every day on this show. And now the decision to allow women to join frontline army fighting has been described as a failed exercise in political correctness, because government figures reveal that only 15 female recruits completed basic training for either infantry or tank units between January and September of 2023. A senior army officer says women are put off joining frontline units amid numerous allegations of rape and sexual discrimination. Well, joining me now is former NATO commander and Royal Navy officer Rear Admiral Chris Parry, CBE. Chris, always a pleasure to see you on the show. So here we are again. We're talking about diversity targets, and it seems that no matter how much they huff and they puff, young women simply aren't joining up.
Well, I mean, the life's not for everybody, Martin. It's not even for most men, to tell you the truth. This is a tough life, and it's a life that is geared towards the sort of physical and mental, I hesitate to say skills, but aptitudes that men have. You know, the idea that men and women are interchangeable in all these roles is ridiculous. What we need to have is all roles open to both men and women, and those that are suitable and have the aptitude for those jobs should be going into them. If we've got 15 women who are going into the infantry and the armoured corps, then that's fine. They're the ones that are suitable. It's as simple as that. Any idea that we should have quotas or any sort of percentage of people from certain ethnic groups or from women is ridiculous. We want the best people who serve our country and can defend it.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
And this report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Child on the wrist, and as Rupert Murdoch gets engaged at 92. Does marriage later in life work? But first, today is International Women's Day, which is a global day celebrating the social, economic, cultural and political achievements of women, and which seeks a gender-equal world, free from bias, stereotypes and discrimination. But is International Women's Day still necessary? Well, to debate this, we have sent Neil Hamilton into the sin bin for 10 minutes. He's in the green room. I think he's got a gin and tonic. And with me in the studio, three fabulous and deeply inspiring women. Political commentator Christine Hamilton, journalist Pandora Forsyth, and TV news legend Sue Cook. Sue, do women still need International Women's Day?
Well, we jolly well shouldn't, should we? It's a shame that we have to have it at all. But unfortunately, I think maybe we still do. I mean, women's wages are still below that of men, even after all these years, all those battles we fought. And I think one of the things that worries me a lot is that two women a week are killed by their partners in domestic abuse. Every week. Nothing's changed. It's not getting any better, it's getting worse. So where's International Women's Day, you know? Why can't we do something about that?
Right, and where's the substance? The sexual assaults, rapes are famously horribly underreported. And, of course, as a former presenter of Crime Watch, you'll have been across that. It was a problem when you were at the Beeb, and it's still a problem now.
Yes, it's still a problem. And the police have tried to take it on. They've tried different methods, but, you know, it's still the figures are the same, and it's shocking.
Pandora, do you think that women still need International Women's Day?
Yeah, I do think we need International Women's Day. As you said, domestic violence, we only have to look at the Sarah Everard case, but it's actually looking at institutions such as the police, where there's still misogyny within it, and it's actually looking deeper than just a day. You know, real work does need to be put in. Money needs to be put into this, and actually changing these institutions which run our society to make sure that, you know, we actually put an end to domestic violence, to rapes, to sexual assaults, which are so predominantly aimed at women. But it's a societal problem. But one day of the year saying International Women's Day, you know, from commercial companies, let's give women cupcakes. We don't want cupcakes. We just want change.
And you feel that businesses have jumped on the bandwagon a bit. They're virtue signalling. They honour International Women's Day, and 364 other days, it doesn't really register.
Well, quite. Exactly that. Let's put together a panel and speak about International Women's Day, but actually, when it comes down to equal pay, getting you know, there's such a small percentage of women who are CEOs, and yes, things do take time, granted, and we've come a long way, but not far enough.
Christine, are you going to put a spanner in the works? Are you going to upset the apple cart? Do you think we should have International Women's Day?
I'm absolutely not going to upset the apple cart, and I'm delighted that you've got three strong, real women on the panel to discuss it. The key, I think, is in the word international. I don't think I would be so enthusiastic about Women's Day just in this country, although all these issues that the two others have just spoken about obviously still exist, and there's a long way for women to go. I don't think a Women's Day would hit it. But taking the world as a whole, women are in the most appalling situations across the world. They are in penury, they're in slavery. I mean, you know, you name it.
Second-class citizens in many societies.
Third-class citizens, not even citizens in many parts of the world. So I think if it can draw attention to that, the situation of women across the world, then I'm all in favour. But I think International Women's Day is what it should be and is and should remain.
We were debating this with the team before we came on air, and one of my colleagues suggested that International Women's Day is patronising. What do you think, Sue?
Well, it isn't really. I mean, it sounds as though it is, but there are so many issues that we really need to tackle, as Christine was saying. And think of all the women we have to sit on our sofas watching the television, the women in Gaza, the way they're suffering. And what about the women hostages in Israel? The UN finally acknowledged in a report 2 days ago that something needs to be done, and that women have been actually assaulted and raped on an ongoing daily basis since October the 7th. Nobody's mentioned it. Nobody's debated it in the UN, the mainstream media, in the world's media, the world's politicians. don't mention it. At least on a day like today, we can perhaps bring it to people's attention and let's bring these women home.
Now, I obviously fully back this day, and we don't do nearly enough, and it should be a daily ritual, not annual. But the usual suspects on social media, progressive types, are very enthusiastic about International Women's Day, but they're very quiet when it comes to issues like trans women participating in female sport. Is there a double standard there? And are women being cancelled via that ideology?
Well, it's crazy that some men want to be women and some men genuinely want to be women. I know trans women who just want to get on with their lives and they're absolutely fine. There are other men who want to slap on a wig and a skirt and pretend they're women just in order to get some benefit or other, or to get off a rape charge, or to get into a women's prison when they've committed a crime, or to get into women's sports, which seems completely and utterly ludicrous. I can't think how that's allowed. There must be a way around that, just, you know, hormone measurements or something.
Well, indeed. What was your reaction to that story this week? And, OK, it's a local story, but I think it has national implications, and it's a women's pond in North London, where the patrons voted to allow trans women to use the women's pond. But that would be a biological male, fully intact, usually male, who identifies as female in the women's pond. I think that's a topic that's relevant to International Women's Day, because I just wonder whether this concept of women's-only spaces being sacrosanct is now being eroded.
Yes, at least we can talk about issues like that for once. Yeah, I know those ponds very well, and there's a great freedom about that pond in Hampstead. There are, you know, women you can be of all shapes, all sizes. You needn't worry about your body. All you can do, you can relax, you can have a swim. But if you've got men, you know, and you're feeling your body's being judged and scrutinised and looked at, it changes the whole atmosphere.
Yeah, what do you think about... I mean, what does that story tell us about the challenge women face? Because I think the whole group here are very open and liberal when it comes to, if you're a trans person, good luck to you, respect your new identity. But what about this issue around women's spaces, Christine?
Well, I mean, I know 2 or 3 trans people, and they, in a million years, would never want to invade our spaces. They would never want to go in to join women's sports, etc., etc. But as Sue said, it's the ones who are, frankly, they're bogus women. They're bogus trans women. You see the pictures of them on social media all the time. I mean, they are a bloke in a skirt and a wig. And those are the people who do a tremendous disservice to the genuine transgender people. I've forgotten the question.
Well, I think you answered it, and you answered it, and you put it to me as well. What do you think about all of this, Panda? Is that a rabbit hole to get down, this issue, the idea of women being cancelled or erased?
Well, I think it's really important that we're having conversations like this and openly talking about this, because I think people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing. But when you have conversations and you have debates and you have fair and balanced arguments, and then real change can happen.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, there have been cases in women's changing rooms, etc., which has really actually brought down the trans community. And as you said, it's a very, very small percentage. I just want to clarify that. Very small percentage. And there are people who are genuinely suffering and would like to go through that process. And that does take many, many years. And obviously, you know, I'm not in that position, so I can't imagine what it would be like. All I can be is very sympathetic. But we do also need to report on the stories such as these awful instances in changing rooms, etc., because it needs to be fair, it needs to be balanced. And just because people are afraid of having these conversations, they shouldn't be. We should be open to it.
Briefly, if you can, Christine, what were you going to say?
Well, 2 things. I think we should stop encouraging children as young as 4 or 5 who say, I want to be a boy. Excuse me, just end it there. Oh, yes, go and play in a tree or something.
Yeah.
And I think the vast majority of people, not just women, but people, are behind the views that we all seem to share.
Yes.
But somebody like J.K. Rowling speaks out, and look what happens to her. So normal, ordinary people are terrified of speaking out because they think that the world will cave in on them in the way that it has attempted to cave in on J.K. Rowling.
Well, a fascinating debate. I think what we've learned from this is that International Women's Day should be every day. Listen, I'll get to more of these issues shortly. But next up, is it wrong to slap your child on the wrist? And as Rupert Murdoch gets engaged at 92, does marriage in later life work? We'll debate that with the Hamiltons and TV news legend. Staying with me in the studio, Sue Cook. See you in 2.
Earlier on Breakfast, That breaking news in the past few moments that Theresa May, the former PM, and of course Maidenhead MP, is to stand down after 27 years.
Well, I'm learning it through you. I'm so disappointed to hear this.
Well, this is obviously a really significant decision from Theresa May to stand down at the next election. As you said, it is a surprise.
People remember that, and the British are stubborn. We're known for being quite stubborn, so I'm not sure how this will help them.
My holiday was the holiday from hell.
From 6, it's Breakfast on GB News.
Hello again, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry through this evening for many areas, but rain and showers will push up from the southwest to bring some showery outbreaks of rain for many of us this weekend. That's as a result of this low pressure system bringing these weather fronts into the southwest through this evening. So that will bring some showery outbreaks of rain for parts of Devon and Cornwall through this evening. Elsewhere, though, it should be dry for much of the evening and through much of the night, having said that, but it will be quite cloudy and breezy. That will limit any frost to just the far northwest of Scotland, but it will be a fairly chilly start to the weekend with that easterly breeze continuing. The wind will be quite strong, particularly over the high ground and northwestern areas throughout Saturday. And further south, we'll see cloud thicken through the afternoon with some drizzly outbreaks of rain to come around lunchtime. Across central and southeastern areas, there will be some brighter weather through the afternoon, but that will allow some showers to break out. Those showers could turn quite heavy across parts of the southwest, so some very heavy rain is possible for parts of Dartmoor, parts of South Wales as well. That rain will be much more widespread through Sunday, particularly across eastern areas of England, as well as parts of Scotland, where there'll be some quite persistent and heavy rain at times. So there could be some flooding issues by the end of the weekend. There will be quite a lot of cloud around on Sunday, but some brighter spells in the southwest. That rain slowly clears through Monday to leave a much drier and brighter day on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Coming up, could Joe Biden survive another 4 years in the White House? And would a Trump victory in November be an early Christmas present for Britain? We'll head to the US and speak to a top commentator. But first, this is an astonishing story. A primary school headmistress has won an unfair dismissal case after she was sacked for assault. This was for tapping her toddler son's hand whilst disciplining him. Shelley Ann Malab-Gulborn was trying to get her 3-year-old to stop playing with a hand sanitizer in her office when she used 2 fingers to attract his attention. The incident was witnessed by the teacher in charge of child safety, who accused her of hurting her son and completed a cause for concern form to report a safeguarding incident. The head teacher was found guilty of gross misconduct and sacked. Well, she's now in line for compensation after an employment judge concluded there was no evidence that she'd committed physical chastisement or an assault and ruled her dismissal unfair. So is it wrong to tap your child's hand as a form of discipline? Let's get the views of television news legend Sue Cook and my Friday friends tonight, Neil and Christine Hamilton. Neil, this sounds to me like a ridiculous story. Potentially this woman's career in ruins. Your reaction?
Well, of course, there's a complete lack of common sense in lots of these kind of situations today, and a Stasi mentality on the part of individuals who are extra officious in trying to enforce what clearly in this case was a misinterpretation of the law.
Yeah.
But it's the lack of common sense and the busybodiness of the whole thing, which I think is so redolent of the nature of which our society has descended since this old HR culture.
Yeah.
There's an army of busybodies out there who are now being employed basically at everybody else's expense, because we all pay the bills in one way or another for the cost of this thing. And, what about parental responsibility? That's what was being exerted in this particular case, and that's the way it should be. It's for parents to discipline their children.
Is it wrong to tap your child on the wrist? I mean, just the very action, Christine?
No, I mean, from what I understand, the child had already been disciplined in a verbal way for messing around with the hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
So he knew he was old enough to know he was doing wrong. No, if she'd slapped him on the wrist, 2 fingers, I mean, it's utterly, utterly absurd. And it was her own child. Now, OK, you may say that the school rules are the school rules, but it was her own child she was disciplining, and I think parents should be allowed to discipline their children in their own way, within limits, of course, but, that was clearly a nonsense. And that woman, think of the trauma that she has been through. I'm not quite sure how long she's been suspended.
And she must be quite a young head teacher, a former head teacher, because she's got small children.
Small child. She's had the most unbelievable I hope she gets a massive ton of money as compensation.
Now, you've got skin in the game, Sue, because I think you're a former school governor.
That's right, yes. And I know, as I was a governor for an academy trust, and I just know how stressful all the teachers feel all the time, because safeguarding is the thing they're all worried about. And this safeguarding teacher, she was obviously the safeguarding lead in the school, and she decided, as a safeguarding person, that she shouldn't have witnessed this tap on the hand. And, I mean, what sort of person she must be is totally bonkers. But anyway, the police didn't think it was worth prosecuting, nor did the local council. But the Academy Trust itself thought, we don't want to be accused of any safeguarding, problems. We'd better we'll discipline the woman and we'll sack her and she can go. We'll have to sacrifice her. And of course, she then had to sue for unfair dismissal. As Christine said, she must have gone through hell for 2 or 3 years. And I hope she gets decent compensation.
Definitely, and a plum job at another school who will be lucky to have her. Meanwhile, Rupert Murdoch, the media magnate, is to tie the knot at the tender age of 92. He's now engaged to Russian molecular biologist Elena Sukova, who is just 67 and positive teenager by comparison. The marriage is expected to take place at Mr. Murdoch's lavish vineyard estate in California later this year. Well, it'll be his fifth marriage, I should say, and you have to hope it is going to be successful. But does marriage in later life work? What do you think, Suka?
Well, I was talking to Prue Leith only a couple of days ago. And
nice name drop.
Yes, and she got married 7 years ago, and she's 84 and looks amazing, and absolutely loves her marriage, and so she'd definitely say yes. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure. But I think I was sad that he split up from Jerry Hall. They looked very happy as a couple, those two. But I think COVID got in the way there, and I think he thought she was being too overprotective and dumped her. He can be quite ruthless.
That's right. I think the family were concerned allegedly that they couldn't get access to their own father because she'd wrapped sort of cotton wool around him as security fence. But so the principle is that it's never too late for love. But do you have to get married when you're so old?
Why does he want to get married, do you think? I mean, what's it for? Does he
triumph of hope over experience, isn't it? I mean, it's extraordinary.
There speaks the voice of experience. Blimey, we're dropping some truth bombs tonight.
When you've had, what is it? Is it 4 failed marriages or 5 failed marriages?
This would be his 5th.
And
so
he had
failed.
one where he got engaged and didn't actually get married, so you can sort of almost count that as well. I mean, why he wants to get married, I don't know, because clearly there's going to be massive prenups. He can't last much longer. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it might last another 10 years.
We hope he will,
years,
but
of course.
he's an older man, you're absolutely right.
So there's bound to be all wrapped around with prenups, but I've no idea whether marriage in later life is a good thing. We hope to find out, don't we, darling, as we get older?
Well. Neil, I hear that you made Christine sign a prenup, so your millions are safe.
It's the other way round, actually.
Well, we've been married so long, it's inertia that keeps us together.
Do you think, I mean, speaking as a gentleman, can you understand, as Sue Cook's raised the question, why Mr Murdoch wants to be married and can't just have a girlfriend at this stage?
Well, I think it's a sign of commitment, isn't it? And he's the age he is. He grew up in the culture that he did, and we want to make things legal, don't we?
Yes. Or is it that he wants to make sure there's someone to look after him in his old age, Neil? Exactly. Bring him a cup of tea.
Exactly. Here's my carer.
There you go. Glad to hear it. Not yet. Let's hope it's going to be a while before that happens. Now, coming up, speaking of carer, could Joe Biden survive another 4 years in the White House? And would a Trump victory in November be an early Christmas present for Britain? We'll debate that with one of America's top political commentators next.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they committed a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use
if you
it.
commit,
there's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Now, Donald Trump's team have launched an attack ad on Joe Biden, questioning whether he could make it for another 4 years in office. Take a listen.
Whatever the hell they want. I guess I should clear my mind here a little bit.
We can all see Joe Biden's weakness. If Biden wins, can he even survive till 2029? The real question is, can we? Make America Great Again, Inc. is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Powerful stuff. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden has come out fighting in his annual State of the Union address. In a fiery performance, he attacked his opponent, Donald Trump, calling him a threat to democracy. The 81-year-old president also defended his record on the economy. Here he is in action.
The middle class finally has a fair shot, and the wealthy have to pay their fair share in taxes. I see a future where we save the planet from the climate crisis and our country from gun violence. Above all, I see a future for all Americans. I see a country for all Americans. And I will always be president for all Americans. So let's build the future together. Let's remember who we are. We are the United States of America.
So, would a November victory for President Trump be an early Christmas present for Britain? But first, let's look at that State of the Union address from the sitting President Joe Biden in the company of one of America's most compelling political and social commentators and the star of the hugely popular Mel K Show podcast, Mel K. Mel, great to have you on the programme. Has Joe Biden proved his critics wrong with this fiery performance?
Oh, no. And thank you so much for having me. It's got to be a real trip for the rest of the world to watch what's going on here. No, frankly, I mean, the American people as a whole are exhausted. The left and right, Republican and Democrat, it is proving to be a farce. More people see it than ever. More people are looking at D.C. and wondering who is running it. And I don't just mean Joe Biden or anyone else. We in America at this point have obviously had some kind of capture by a rogue kind of situation where they are keeping us divided. And he gets up there and basically says that 80 million people and Donald Trump are the problem and he's the uniter and all of that. Where the truth is the entire of D.C. is actually proving itself to be a incompetent, unworkable and corrupt situation that I believe the people are actually getting forced closer together watching what's happening through this administration rather than far apart, which is what I believe these people really want.
I mean, the question posed in that attack video from the Trump camp is, could Joe Biden survive another 4 years in office? What's your view?
Well, first and foremost, I believe that we should wait and see what happens at the Democratic convention. There's a lot of talk in the background about that, A. And B, you know, the truth is that nobody really wants to continue down a path of endless war and America being all over the world. A lot of people want a different direction. And right now, it's even more about ideology and what the American people want for our future rather than, you know, a man. It's not really about Trump or Biden at this point. And most Americans are getting that. It's really about the direction of this nation and our future. And I honestly believe that most people are now looking at, you know, who is offering them peace, who's offering to protect our border, who's offering to reinvest in America, and that obviously is Donald Trump over Biden. But making it to Election Day seems very iffy, but we will see the Democratic convention. Anything could happen there.
There you go. Well, reading between the lines, I wonder if in that answer you're suggesting the Democrats might just throw Joe Biden under the bus and put someone like Gavin Newsom in the hot seat. But let's talk about Donald Trump, who could be successful in November. Let's, if we can, Mel K, bring my brilliant Friday friends into this conversation, Neil and Christine Hamilton. Mel K, would a Trump victory in November be an early Christmas present for the United Kingdom?
Well, in my opinion, I think that it would be an early Christmas present for everyone on planet Earth that would like to see peace ahead and would like to see negotiations and like to see us get back on track instead of continuing down a path that is not really good for anyone on planet Earth. We just really need to have some open conversations. There's been very little talk about what peace could look like, what prosperity could look like. And I think there's a lot of people looking at the globalist organizations like the UN and the World Economic Forum and other groups and thinking, what is their part? What are they playing? And why aren't nations and nations getting together to discuss things directly instead of going through third parties? So there's a lot out there that could happen for the world. And I believe for the better, honestly. I don't think the direction for anyone isn't going in a good pattern.
Well, Mel K, let me put that to Neil Hamilton, who is the leader of UKIP, a national political party in this country. Neil, Mel K there says that a Trump victory would be good for the world. Would it be good for Britain?
Well, I would, but I think if we got Keir Starmer as Prime Minister, all bets are off. Of course, Donald Trump is half British. His mother was born in Scotland.
He's an Anglophile.
He's an Anglophile, and he wanted to have a trade deal with this country, which our government foolishly put on the back burner. I think Trump would be, as we've just heard from Mel, good for the world. Putin, I don't think, would ever have dared to go into Ukraine if Trump were president of the United States, and I don't think Xi Jinping would be threatening Taiwan in the obvious way that he does if Trump were the president. So I think that a Trump victory would be good for us all in so many different ways.
However, Christine, this is a guy that's been found guilty in a civil court of a sexual assault. He's mired in all sorts of legal woes. Many think he's a criminal. Is he fit for high office?
Well, the American people, it's their choice, not ours. The American people factored all that in when they voted for him in the first place, just like the British people factored all Boris's faults in when they voted for him. So they know what they're getting with Trump. And as Neil said, I think, personally, the world would be a much safer place with Trump because the other side, the Putins, etc., would not know what he was going to do next. My only big concern about Trump is that he has said that he will stop sending money to Ukraine, which I think will be tragic because Ukraine is fighting on the front line for the rest of Europe, and I would hope that the United States would stand by poor Ukraine.
Mel K, I'm out of time. A couple of seconds, if you can. Do you think that Donald Trump wins in November?
Yes, 100%.
OK, well, look, a straight answer to a straight question. Let me tell you, you must check out the brilliant Mel K Show podcast, wherever you get your podcast. It's a brilliant listen. Mel K, do join us again soon. Brilliant to have you on the programme.
I will. Okay. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's great stuff. What an interesting debate that was. Next up, Patrick Christie's What's Happening, Big Man?
Yeah, action-packed show tonight. We've got the Feminists for Palestine movement, which is a bit like turkeys for Christmas, isn't it? But I've got Elon Levy on, the Israeli government spokesperson, to give them some home truths about exactly what Hamas are doing to the female hostages over there. British seaside towns being desecrated as well by mass migration. And should the arts vandals be sent to prison? And loads more. Should we legalise cannabis, Mark?
Well, listen, only if you're going to join me in a toke. But you don't need it. You're naturally high, Patrick.
I am, yes. No, not for me. Not for me.
Brilliant stuff. Listen, Patrick, looking forward to that. Patrick's up in a couple of minutes. Do join me for Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday. The Take at 10, The Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and, of course, my top pundits. My thanks to the brilliant Christina Neil Hamilton, the two Daniels and Ark. I'll see you tomorrow at 9.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It should stay dry through this evening for many areas, but rain and showers will push up from the southwest to bring some showery outbreaks of rain for many of us this weekend. That's as a result of this low pressure system bringing these weather fronts into the southwest through this evening. So that will bring some showery outbreaks of rain for parts of Devon and Cornwall through this evening. Elsewhere, though, it should be dry for much of the evening and through much of the night, having said that, but it will be quite cloudy and breezy. That will limit any frost to just the far northwest of Scotland, but it will be a fairly chilly start to the weekend with that easterly breeze continuing. The wind will be quite strong, particularly over the high ground and northwestern areas throughout Saturday. And further south, we'll see cloud thicken through the afternoon with some drizzly outbreaks of rain to come around lunchtime. Across central and southeastern areas, there will be some brighter weather through the afternoon, but that will allow some showers to break out. Those showers could turn quite heavy across parts of the southwest, so some very heavy rain is possible for parts of Dartmoor, parts of South Wales as well. That rain will be much more widespread through Sunday, particularly across eastern areas of England, as well as parts of Scotland, where there'll be some quite persistent and heavy rain at times. So there could be some flooding issues by the end of the weekend. There will be quite a lot of cloud around on Sunday, but some brighter spells in the southwest. That rain slowly clears through Monday to leave a much drier and brighter day on Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're springing into spring and giving you the chance to win the seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won, plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package to enjoy, including a handheld games console